Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Cuyahoga County Public Safety and Justice Affairs Committee meeting this Tuesday, February 4th. Roll call, please.
And just as a reminder to all who are in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Ms. Conwell. Ms. Turner. Ms. Turner is absent at the moment. Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. There is a quorum. And also like the record to reflect that council members Hauser and Schlepper are in attendance.
Welcome, gentlemen. And do we have a public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one has signed in.
Public comment? Great. In your packets, you have the minutes of the January 21st meeting. If they're in order, I'll accept a motion in a second. I have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Against? Thank you. 2025-0045.
Resolution number 2025-0045, awarding a total sum not to exceed $10,000 to the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People for the Change of the Narrative on Youth Justice and Violence Prevention Project from the District 9 ARPA Community Grant Fund.
Welcome. In your name, please, sir.
My name is Edwin Hubbard Jr., and I serve as the Executive Director of the Cleveland Branch NAACP. Today, I'm asking for assistance as we continue to create programs that address youth and juvenile justice. I'm putting together a speaker series to engage community members on how we can assist our local government with juveniles. Juvenile justice and youth violence is something that continues to be a problem in Cleveland and in Cuyahoga County, and we seek to address it. So the two things that you always see from me, hear from me, is advocating on behalf of those who don't have a voice, and then also civic engagement. From the youth side of things, I want youth to understand the power of their voices and what it means for them to be civically engaged. But from a community member standpoint, I want community members to know the resources and the things that they can do to be assistance to youth. So I'm seeking to put on continual programs and panels throughout this year to support that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What age groups are you talking about?
High school specifically, but my recent thought process is going down as low as age 13 and up.
Okay. When I was a policeman in Westlake, I used to teach the Eddie Eagle program to, but much younger children than that. And I went through workbooks and, there was a little like song thing that went with it and all that, and it had a pretty good impact as far as the younger kids go. So, I mean, if you ever get into that, if you contact some of the police possibly in your area, they can probably get all that information if you want to reach down to younger kids. And most of that, all that information is generally supplied for free. Just have to teach it, that's all.
I welcome that information.
But just, if you want to talk sometime, just holler. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
To the chair, to Mr. Hubbard, Edward, I'm familiar with the great work you guys do in the community, so if the clerk can add my name to this ordinance. And then, Edward, I've been asking everyone all morning, I think transparency is key in any relationship, so please keep us updated on what you guys have going on in the work in the future.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say, this brings me back to old memories. I think when I was a youth, I was on the NAACP youth group, and I remember that was my first award I got from the community. My mom made me get into that kind of stuff and be a community leader. So very well aware of the work that you guys do.
Thank you. The youth is important. I'm very much interested in creating a youth council. And I believe like at the center of that is civic engagement. Youth have to find a way to be connected and value what it means to be a citizen.
And thank you, ma'am. This committee put together a committee, a juvenile justice committee. You might want to touch base with them. I know they're working right now, I believe, on their paper to us. they'll be delivering that to us, and then we'll be dealing with the court. But most everything's run through the court. Kids that are in the juvenile system, and our hope was it's the kid that goes in the juvenile system and gets out, and we don't want them going back in. That's the big problem, and they're working on that. So our staff could probably at least put you in contact with that committee. And we archive all their meetings, so you might want to review that.
I welcome that as well.
Okay.
Through the
Any
chair, if
further?
I could
Yes,
ask
sir.
a question as well. Could you just give us an example of some of the programming that you do to the folks that might be listening? And I'm curious as well, having done some work in this space.
So having panels, inviting, so I just did something this past weekend that I'm pretty proud of. It was called Civically Engaged. You might have saw it on Fox 8, where I had Congresswoman Chantel Brown, County Executive Chris Ronayne, Meredith Turner, and others in a room address youth on the importance of civic engagement. So we use examples of their stories and things that they've gone through in order to get to the places in their career, but then also what it means to them. I've had city councilmen like Richard Starr as a part of the panels to address questions like, what does that look like from a community standpoint? So what my thought process was, a child could see how local government impacts their lives far more than, you could say the president of the United States. Although, the president of the United States has power, your local government has more of an impact on your life than anybody else. So the focus is to get people to understand. Once you understand that, that's how you learn how to navigate and to not work the system, but collaborate with the system in order to have the community that you desire to have. So that was a good event. It was at the Agora. I look to have that, every year. It started with around the hope of 200, and I'm hoping to expand that to every high school student in Cuyahoga County next year and moving forward. So you'll hear from me again.
Okay, good. Okay, if everybody's comfortable with 2025-0045 to the full council for second reading, I'll accept a motion in a second.
So moved?
A motion and a second, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, against? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Under discussion items, we have the highly anticipated, long-awaited return of Mr. Applebaum to take us through where we're at with the jail programming and building. Mr. Applebaum, good to see you again.
Thank you.
Somehow we get older and you stay the same. Must be something in the water on the
I
farm.
started old and I stay old.
There you go. That's a good way to go, huh?
Well, thank you. Good
Welcome, sir. And
afternoon.
if I could, caution council, he's going to be about 30 to 40 minutes, and we'll have plenty of time for questions afterwards. I want him to get through it, so take notes, copious notes if necessary.
Thank you. And I intend to see if I can maybe be a little less than 30 or 40 minutes, but as the people in the room have told me, they always bet on the over and they always win. So we'll see how quickly I can get through this. What I'm going to do is take you through several major points on the project today. There is an agenda here we are. There is an agenda. I'm going to start with a brief background and a little bit of a process review. I recognize that there are some members of council who are completely new to this, a member of council who's had a little bit into this, and then we have some folks that have been doing this from the outset. So you have different levels of understanding. I'll try to summarize some of this, and we certainly can do a deeper dive for some of you into what this is really all about at another time, just to bring you up to speed, because there's a lot of history and a lot of complexity to this. By way of example, I actually started on this project, well, for a year I waited. We had a year where we had to wait, but I really started on this in 2019. So this is really the 6th year that we have been engaged in going through this in one way or the other. But we're going to go through the brief background and process review. Then I'm going to talk about 3 key elements of the project: the scope of the project, where it is today, the budget of the project, where it is right now, and then the schedule, what we anticipate in the future. And then certainly we'll answer any questions. If there's something that I'm talking about while we go through it, if you need a clarification, I don't mind being interrupted if I can clarify something. So by way of background, so there is a slide that I have in front of you. There's a little bit of complexity to it, but this is an attempt on one slide to kind of explain where we are as a matter of process. So this starts up really in early 2019, and as some of you know, this really started up with both working with council and also the steering committee that we had for several years. In the process, starting in 2019, we went through a long series of meetings that involved programming the jail. It was actually programming the whole Justice Center project, but at that point in time, we were looking at both, but the jail was a critical component of that. Went through and basically established space standards, operational standards, what really needed to be in that jail, what the issues were in the current jails, why we were building a new jail, and went through very long and extensive meetings on this, as Councilman Gallagher knows, because he participated in those steering committee meetings, and he has some very large books to prove it with the notes of all those meetings. There came a point in time in 2021 where we also agreed on the project delivery method that we're going to use going forward, the process going forward. And at that time, we had the first iteration of the program done to move forward. We retained the criteria architect, the architect that does the conceptual design, which was a large team led by HOK with a lot of local participants. And at that point in time, we started, we confirmed. We've had a couple of programmatic confirmations. We've taken the program, we've confirmed it, we've reconfirmed it. But we went through the first process of confirming that methodology and moving forward. We then, as that occurred, we were working on setting the criteria for site selection, went through a long, involved process that some of you will remember. With respect to site selection, we're looking at opportunities in Cleveland, and you all remember everything that went on with all of that, looking at opportunities outside of the city of Cleveland. Basically got to October of 22, where the sort of the steering committee process came to an end. But everyone continued on with county resources to keep driving the process forward, started to look at an alternative site, went through another exercise to review the program with the people who were then on staff with the Sheriff's Department, others inside at the county, went through the process of getting the new site selected, the new site acquired, continued on with the effort then of programming, looking at all the pieces and parts of the project, and getting to the point where we are today. And where we are today is at a very special time on the project, because this is the day that we're going to be able to tell you three things. What is the scope of the project going forward? What is the budget for the project going forward? And what is the schedule for the project going forward? We are at a point right now where these determinations are in place, and we are moving forward without delay to continue on with the process at a rate, at a pace, and at a rate to get this project built within a budget, for a scope, and within a schedule. So that's the we are here. And if you take a look at the chart, this process chart, everything that has occurred to date, you see in check marks. And then you see to the right of we are here, those are the boxes that we now have to do to get through the rest of the project. I'm going to show you a schedule a little bit later that shows you some of the key elements of these boxes coming up, including a couple of the key events where we come before council. But this is a process chart, just kind of in a summary fashion, tell you where we've been and where we are. I just want to point out, in terms of the project team, And some of you will remember the methodology that we selected to do this project. But at this point in time, we have, obviously, the county is the owner. And what you see on the right are the core, what we call the core project team. These are the individuals at the county who are really heavily involved in day-to-day decisions. And so you see Nicole, Laurel, Phil, and Russ are here. Captain Peters is on this team. And these are the individuals who are really dedicated on a daily basis of looking at everything that we're looking at. Now, there's others involved at the county, obviously, who are involved at different levels in this process in the administration. But these are the folks that are the core team that really work on this project every single day. They're the people that we work with at PMC. They're the people who intersect with the design professionals and help us with the decision-making process. You can see the box there, which is owner's rep. That's my company. That's me, PMC. Here today with Ellis Katz and Chris Panicki. Who are these guys? They're part of my team, the owner's rep team. And we are, between us and your county core team, we are the people really working day to day on behalf of the county to drive this process. Obviously, on the left-hand side, we have the criteria architect. That's HOK. It's not just HOK. It's a team led by HOK with others. But those are the folks who are really doing the conceptual design of the project. And it's their efforts that have been very involved in design for the last many, many months. And in the upcoming months, those are the folks who are driving the design process with us. We have the design builder. That is the Cuyahoga County Justice Partners. That's a consortium, but it's really led by Gilbane Building Company with a cast of others. I think Pete from Gilbane is here. That's Pete. And so what's happening right now is we go through the process of design. They are the ones who are continually looking at the design, looking at providing cost estimates for the various pieces and parts of what we do, helping us with constructability review. So they are involved. You know, they ultimately will be the builders of the project. They ultimately will give us the guaranteed maximum price. But on this methodology, they work with us through pre-construction as we work through these processes. Ultimately, there will be a handoff when conceptual design is done. Under Gilbane, the architect of record will be a team under Gilbane to prepare the working drawings from the conceptual drawings, and then there'll be a slew of subcontractors who actually do all the packages of all the different pieces and parts of what goes into the project. I know we've been through this before in the project team, but I thought for the benefit of the new folks, we would just kind of review this chart very quickly once again. The whole methodology of design build is something that the county has utilized on previous occasions with great success on the Hilton Hotel and on the Convention Center. It's ideal for this project, and if any of the new members of council want to talk about how that works and why it works, happy to do that in a separate session. Project scope. So, let me talk about this from a couple different perspectives. So right now, we have a building, a main campus building, that is 872,000, well, it's actually 852,000 square feet. And then we have a professional development center, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is a standalone building, which is 20,000 square feet. So this project is 872,000 square feet of gross square footage on multiple floors. And if you just want to think about how vast that is, I think a football field is 57,000 square feet. I know an acre is like 44,000 square feet. So that just gives you an idea of the size of this project. What does it hold? Well, it holds a lot of things, but the principal thing that we talk about a lot is housing. And I know that there's been a lot of discussion about the size of the jail in terms of the number of beds, rated capacity. You may recall, Councilman Gallagher, how early on in the process there was a drive to try to get the jail as small as it could be. We talked about trying to get it down to a 1,600 number. The jail at times has had over 2,000 people in it, as you know. The program that we were working with for the last few years had a rated capacity of about 1,904. You'll remember that number. And right now, the actual number that we are working with in this jail is a rated capacity of 1,886 beds. And you'll recall that the rated capacity is always larger than the operational capacity. There's that it's the 85% factor. So the idea is that the number of beds on an average day should be about 85% of that, but it should be capability to hold 1886 if there's a surge, and that's, or if you have cells that are out of operation for maintenance. That's the formula, but it's 1886 beds. What's really important, and you don't have to study it in detail, but that chart on the right actually shows you how those 1886 beds are configured. And what this tells you is in this jail, there are going to be 52 distinct housing units. So there's going to be these 52 units. Some of them will have single bed cells. Some of them will have 4-bed cells. Many of them will be the maximum amount of beds that you can have under the Ohio rules, which would be 48 beds. If you want to go more than 48 beds, you have to do something special, which impacts your operation. That's what they did in Franklin County, but we're not doing that because we don't want to commit to all the additional correctional officers. It becomes inefficient. But you can see the configuration. If you look at that chart, you will also see that there's roughly 24 different classifications. And a classification would be, for that particular inmate at the jail, you know, this is the kind of housing unit they would be in. You know, half are female, half are male. Some of them they're more and less restrictive, depending on the nature of who's involved in that cell. They have different levels of health issues and health concerns. One of the big issues in the current jail, as everyone knows, is the inability of it to take care of medical needs as a physical matter. So you have different classifications, whether you have acute or chronic health conditions, mental conditions, other health conditions. You have detox, and you also have the BCC, which is the Behavioral Care Center. So you have all these different classifications, all these different housing units. Think of them as pieces of a puzzle. And I'm going to come back to that analogy in a minute. Now, in addition to that, we obviously have all the core support facilities, which is everything that supplies food service and everything else. And the jail itself, all the core facilities are designed for expansion of up to 2,400 beds. So right now, it has 1,886 beds. If we had to expand it, we could. And we would not have to expand the core facilities, wouldn't have to expand food service. We would add housing units to the jail. And that was part of the original program, as Councilman Gallagher will recall, expandable to 2,400. And finally, of course, the other element of this is everything that is part of Sheriff's administration, including a professional development center. So one of the questions is to get to this scope, what has actually been occurring over the last several months, and particularly since the last time I was here in front of you? Well, think about this analogy. What the team has been working on very hard is to all of the different spaces in the building. And I mean, right here you see the housing units. That's 52 different spaces, if you will. But there's hundreds of other spaces. All the support spaces, storage spaces, food service spaces, everything else that goes in the jail. Think of all of those spaces as puzzle pieces. So everyone gets together from the design team and internally, the Sheriff's Department, and we talk about what has to be in each of those individual rooms, those puzzle pieces, if you will. They are designed to meet the program. Here's everything that has to happen in that particular puzzle piece in the jail. And then what happens is, so you create all the necessary puzzle pieces. Now imagine you have a table with a jigsaw puzzle, and you have all the puzzle pieces laid out. If you just put them all out there, they don't fit together initially. In fact, they take up a lot of space, because there's all the spaces between them. So at a point in time, you get all the puzzle pieces, you lay them out, and you kind of figure out, what's the square footage and what's the size that you have to have in that jail if you cannot figure out how to fit them together and make them more efficient. We went through that process. We did some reviews of the square footage. And as always occurs, that square footage becomes, extraordinarily large. You have to figure out how to get the puzzle pieces to fit together. So over the last several months, the effort has been to say, okay, we have the puzzle pieces. We're not going to change them. They have to, at least programmatically, they have to do the function that they are supposed to serve. But now let's figure out how to fit them all together. How do you arrange them so the building is as efficient as it can be? How do you remove unnecessary interstitial space? How do you get the pieces to fit together? Some of the pieces, you may have to reconfigure them. You may have to shave a rough corner off of them. But that's the analogy. We've been working very, very hard to get all these puzzle pieces to fit together. And I have to tell you, in my view, it's been a very successful effort because we've been able to take a building before this exercise that still had a lot of square footage, and square footage equates to cost, both operation cost and construction cost. And I think we've done a very effective job of getting it down to where it needs to be to fit within a reasonable budget. So if you take a look at this next slide, and this is not that different in concept from what you've seen before, but what this basically tells you is the current layout of the building. Now, this is not a design. This is obviously not architecture. This is simply showing you adjacencies of components of the building and how they set up. But basically, if you start out sort of at the bottom, and you can see, 480s I-480s at the bottom, Transportation Boulevard to the right, Granger Road on top. And you can see starting from the bottom, the area, which is number 13, where you'll have visitor parking. The entry area at number 9, that's where RTA will come up and there'll be a stop there. You then have your lobby area at number 2 with your, there's an interior courtyard, a design feature right behind it, which is, and then to either side of it, to the right-hand side, number 8, that's where Sheriff's Administration is going to be. That's a multi-story facility for Sheriff's Administration. On the left-hand side, which is number 1, that is where your release program is for people as they exit the jail, getting goods and services and the help they need for reentry into the community. Immediately adjacent to that is the BCC, which is the Behavioral Care Center. We can talk a little bit more about that. But essentially then where you see number 4, those are where your major housing units are on multiple floors. And I'll show you another depiction of what that would be like. The Sally Port to the right, that's number 7, and that leads into, or leads from the covered parking area for the site. You see a few other features, loading dock, where the central utility plant is number 5. And then there's an area there, number 6, which is reserved. We're still exploring an area for grass underfoot. That has not been fully designed yet, but it's a reserved area for exploring a grass underfoot area. Something that you have not seen before, or some of you have seen it in meetings, but it hasn't been in a public meeting, I don't think, is Area 14, which is the Professional Development Center. So currently, if you went to the site right now, what number 14 right now is actually the structure and walls of an Aldi's shop, an Aldi's store. When this was originally, the site originally was intended for retail, they started on the Aldi's, built it, but never completed it, never occupied it. That structure still exists there. We've made the determination that that structure can actually be used. So we can get some use out of it, some use out of the foundation, some use out of the walls, and we can convert that. And the ideal use for this is as a professional development center for the Sheriff's Department. What we contemplate doing there is taking some of the function that might have otherwise been in the Sheriff's Administration component of the building, putting it up there. And that would be like training facilities, training rooms, places for testing, for teaching. You can imagine some of the things, some of the activities the sheriff will go through up there. And the benefit of doing there, first of all, it's less expensive because this does not have to be in a secured area of the jail. This can be a less expensive building type to modify that building. Some of those activities may be noisy. There may be reasons to take it out of the jail proper. Also, you could use it off hours. When people come to that building, they don't have to go through the central administration, the central entrance of the jail or any other aspect. So this is a cost savings opportunity. It's an opportunity to isolate this. It's also an opportunity where you may have other law enforcement agencies that come and share exercises or do something there without having to go through the main administration of the jail. So that is one feature using an existing aspect of the site that we didn't have before. If you go to the next slide, and all this is a massing model. All this shows you is how this would lay out, and the feature of this is, you recall the last time I was here, we had this discussion about building height, and I told you that the building would be no less than 3 stories, no more than 4 stories. At that time, it was actually 3.5 stories. It was 3 stories, and there were areas on top of that for housing. As part of this exercise of putting together the jigsaw puzzle, we were able actually to make the building more efficient. So right now, it is a 3-story building. There's no 3.5, it's 3 stories, no taller than that. The things that you see, by the way, those 3 little bump outs, they're actually not little. This is a huge building. But those bump outs, those represent the areas where you'd have mechanical equipment or a penthouse for elevators or things on top. But that's not an occupied area. It's 3 stories. And once again, if you can take the prior graphic and you can orient this on it, and you can see how the building sort of lays out. And this is just a massing model. This has no architecture. It doesn't show you anything aesthetically about the building. There will be design that builds interest in the building, both in terms of how the outside walls look. There could be some articulation, but this is basically the massing of the building. And the next step as we move through design is to take this and then go through the successive steps of driving the design used with these parameters. Another important thing I want to talk about, the essential element of this building, what is so different about this than our existing jail, is how we use the housing units. And as I said, there's going to be over 50 housing units in this building. Now, what you see here, this is not our building. This is just a rendering from, a concept rendering kind of from other buildings of the type of idea that we have here. And the essential idea is not having to take those people who are inmates and not having to transport them all throughout a structure like we do at the current jail. It's to bring the services right to the building so the individuals who are in these housing units stay there and they're able to freely move into recreation, and they're able to move into the other units where people come for different services. So this was the concept. Now, I'm going to just show you something about how this is translated. We don't have renderings yet, but just from a 2-dimensional perspective. So what you see now is this would be, what you see on the left is the lower level, what you see on the right is the upper level, and this would just be a typical housing unit, a single cell, 48 beds, the first floor. And you'll see, if you go back to the original chart, you'll see there's several of these 48 housing units, primarily for general population intake, both male and female. And what you see here, kind of from left to right, the rec yard, which is in green. Now, once again, this is open. There's outdoor light coming in, and there's light that comes through the front. So this is the natural light that comes through the whole unit. But the key is that people, inmates who are on the floors, can simply go from their cells. They'd be in the common area, and they go right to the rec area. No one has to transport them anywhere. They can get the natural light. They can get into the rec area right from the floor. Up, you see the common area with tables, chairs, et cetera, in the middle, cells, the single cells, both on the upper part, in the lower part of the diagram. There's some things here that are going to change. For example, the showers that are on the right will probably move to the middle. We're still working on that. But what's real critical about these units are the services on the right-hand side of the graphic. So these are the other things, other than recreation, these are the other things that happen right at the housing unit. So for this one, what you see on the top there, that's where medical exam and that's where medicine distribution, medicine pass-through occurs right on the top. It's where medication comes. It's where they can get their exams and get their medical care right there. There's a secure vestibule to come in and out of the unit. And then you have your areas for non-contact visitation. This is where the inmates go on one side, those who are visiting come in from the other, and they can have their visitation. There's no threat of passing contraband, but it can be face-to-face right there. And then finally, on the bottom, there's the multipurpose room. So each of these units has a multipurpose room that can do a number of things, whether it's counseling, whether they're meetings, you name it. There's a lot of functions that can be in these multipurpose rooms. So, and then on the right-hand side, you just see this is the lower level. There's a mezzanine level with cells that go around it. And this is actually the current square footage and configuration that is built into the square footage of the jail. The next slide shows the same idea. Now you have a 4-bed cell. In this jail, all the cells are either 1-bed cells or 4-bed cells. Depending on the use, there's some dormitory space, but here you see, once again, the same idea for 4-bed cells, the rec yard in green on the left, the same functions on the right, laid out a little differently to efficiently fit the space, the common area, and then the upper tier on the lower right. So these are the housing units, 50 of them in different configurations throughout the jail. They're really the engine for what drives the construction of the jail. Working through these housing units, I just want to point out something. So when you originally get these things and you have ideas, take those rooms on the right-hand side. You may have seen configurations of these rooms, and let's just say one of those rooms, originally was 3 feet, had a depth of greater than 3 feet. And you might say, what's the big deal, whether it's 3 feet more, 2 feet less? Well, here's the big deal. If you can efficiently eliminate 3 feet on that one side, that 3 feet is continued all the way down. It's 120 feet in length that is now 3 feet times 120 feet. All that square footage, all that volume, all that construction, all the interstitial things that have to happen outside of it, and then multiply that by 50. So that's why just a few inches in how you configure one room has such an impact on this entire complex. That's the example of putting together the puzzle pieces that I was explaining a couple of minutes ago. So now the question that people have been asking, I guess for years, is what does this scope likely to cost? We have gone through extensive exercises with parametric estimating, and what you see here right now is the summary of the budget. And this is a budget to get this project completed according to a schedule I'm going to show you, to get it built without further delay. And the total development budget is $889 million for this project. This does not include the real estate, by the way. This is the development of budget without the real estate. In terms of everything in this budget that ultimately will be controlled by the design builder, which is the equivalent of what the guaranteed maximum price will be, it's approximately, at this point in time, around $785 million of this budget. Now, there are items in the county has contingency there. Some of that contingency may by scope, so there may be some transfers between these two groups, but you see the design builder costs up above. That's everything to design, to construct, and everything that goes along with it. And then you see below the county costs. And the county costs are the criteria design costs and all of those consulting fees, all of the FF&E, furnitures, fixture, and equipment that we have to put into it. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm not going to start over. This is the slide that I've been talking about. It's going to have the FF&E, which is the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, also OS&E. These are the owner's supplies. The owner, aside from furniture and fixtures, the owner has to supply the jail. It has all sorts of other components, such as insurance, and then operational costs as you're building it, such as the utility services you're going to use to heat it temporarily and permanently as you're building it. And then we have contingencies. Needless to say, we're still at an early stage of design, and things are going to occur both during design and construction, and the owner has to maintain an effective contingency. We hope we can reduce it at some point in time, but this is the responsible budget right now. And this also projects all of the escalation within this budget over literally the next 5 years. So it's not like, oh my goodness, we have escalation next year. That we've projected that. Hopefully our projections are wrong. Hopefully we go through a period of time when we have very minimal inflation. That has not been our history in the past. So we're using something that's a little conservative, but it's the best judgment in the industry right now going forward for the next several years. So that is a word about the budget. So very high level, what's happening now in terms of schedule. So what's happening now with knowing the scope, knowing the budget, we are walking through the completion of schematic design. So we have a phase which is scheduled to complete the second week of April, where we will have our schematic design phase completed. From now until then, we regularly have meetings with the people that you've talked about, going through detail after detail after detail. Every week we have critical meetings to hone in on the details within this scope and within this budget. We will get to our final schematic design. We will get that estimated. And if our number is higher than our budget, everybody on this team is committed to reduce it, to figure out ways without affecting scope to manage that to the budget. So we're managing this to the budget at every step, but we've already done the estimating, so we're confident that our budget will be successful in this endeavor. We will then launch into the design development phase, which is the more detailed design, where all of the, what happens, schematic design is still mostly about spaces, adjacencies, design development. Now we're talking about all the materials, the material selection, the architectural treatment of the building, and all the many, many details in the next phase. When we get done with design development, and you can see there, that design development package is also the basis for the guaranteed maximum price. So that package will then be priced by our design builder, and that will be the basis of the guaranteed maximum price. When that is accepted, we have the guaranteed maximum price within this budget for the rest of the project. We enter into our GMP amendment with the design builder. You will also have your bond financing that covers the rest of that cost, and we move forward. A couple critical dates here. Based on this schedule, we believe that we will probably be back to you or back to council in September to introduce a bond resolution for the amount of the bond that will be required to do this. We believe that we will, by the end of the year, have the final GMP proposal, which we will reconcile. We believe that with that reconciled and with the action you're going to take on the bond resolution, the entire thing can then close, in February. That doesn't mean that we're waiting to February to commence construction. Our plan is to start with early packages this year, which are still within the budget and also within the $30 million that you guys have already appropriated as part of the contract. So what does that mean? It's site clearing, and it's as far as we can get in an early foundation package. So more detail about that later, but we completely anticipate that you will see construction starting this year, even before these final steps on the GMP. As a matter of fact, some activity on the site is going to be occurring within the next few weeks because we are erecting the temporary fence. Our first actual package is the temporary fencing and security package. Ultimately, the next sheet that you see does lay out at the bottom. It shows the early site and foundation design. It shows bidding of those and permitting, and it shows the remaining construction activities. There's some dots at the end of this because depending on how effective we are at the beginning will tell us a little bit about the end of the project. It's basically a 3-year, a little bit more than a 3-year construction period. Certainly, it's going to be completed in early 2029. You know, can that be pulled back to at the end of 2028, early 2029? Yet to be determined, but certainly no later than after the first few months of 2029. But we're still looking to see if we can get this done a few months earlier. It depends on the early packages. A couple more notes, generally speaking, about this process that we're working through. Note number one is that, and Mr. Gallagher will be acutely, Councilman Gallagher, aware of this. For example, the HOK contract, we actually did that in 2021. We did that in 2021 for a scope of work that assumed a different project on a different site during a different time frame. We have to bring those folks who've been working on this project for several years, we have to bring their contracts up to speed because now we have the budget for this project, we have the time frame for this project, we have the scope for this project. So within the budget I showed you, we have placeholders because we already know what the reasonable costs are for bringing those contracts up to date. The first thing you'll probably see from us is we'll come back to you to get those contracts revised now to match the scope and what we're talking about here. And yes, there will be an increase because of the additional years and the work they've done, but that will be one of the activities that occurs all within the budget that we've presented. So that's one aspect of that. Did you want, and I'll ask this, did you want, I know you handed me some questions from Dale, did you want to go through the other questions first, then come back to these, or how do you want to do this?
I'll tell you what, if you could just answer Mr. Miller's questions first, and then we can open it up.
Okay. I was handed 2 questions from Council President Miller. Let me read them to you, and then let me do my best to answer them. I'm going to call on some help here from some others on one of these. The first question is, are there key design elements of the jail that have not been finalized, such as whether there will be a food pantry? If not, why, and what is the timetable for finalizing these elements? So I'm going to answer this 2 ways. There are many design elements which have not been finalized because that's part of the natural evolution. I don't think that's what Councilman Miller is talking about. But for example, the treatment of the outside wall, the materials that will ultimately use, some of the architectural features, that hasn't been finalized yet because you do that as you get into design development. That's part of the natural evolution. I think what Councilman Miller is asking about are programmatic areas. And so I'm going to answer it that way. And I will say that most of the key areas of this project are they were actually in some way or another or most of them were in the original program. So for example, when we talk about the BCC, there was a concept in the original program to have beds in what was the equivalent of the behavioral care center. What they were, and Councilman Gallagher, once again, you may remember this from DLR. When we talked about diversion, we said there was a certain population that needed these same primary treatment services, but you can't take them outside of the secured environment for various reasons. So there were beds in the jail that were primarily for behavioral care within the secured area of the jail because you couldn't move them outside of the jail into like a diversion facility. So those beds existed. What the BCC is the refinement of that concept with a lot more detail after looking at other facilities that do this. So the concept was always there. It's been refined, and now there's 60 beds in this BCC. Some of the areas, so Councilman Miller is specifically, he mentions the word food pantry. Well, what is in the facility right now is the area, and if you went back to the graphic I showed you, it's what's called the release program, number 1. It's where reentry is. So this concept really does not exist in the jail right now, but this is where you provide services and assistance to those who are leaving the jail so they don't immediately have a problem. And part of that is to supply some food. I mean, Laurel could give us more detail on that if you want to. Just take a second and talk about that, and then I'll talk about a couple of the other areas.
Good afternoon, Council. Laurel Domansky Diaz, Justice and Health Equity Officer for the county. Yes, to reiterate Mr. Applebaum's point, the Reentry Center is really looking at how do we meet the basic needs of folks as they're leaving the facility, and perhaps, he referenced the food pantry, but also do they need bus tickets? Do they need to charge their phone? Do they need a jacket because they came in June and are leaving in December? Kind of just being an all-inclusive kind of basic resource center for people as they're leaving. In addition, we'd like to look at having some kind of potential vocational programs for reentry folks as well, housing resources, things like that. But again, it's quite limited. Councilman Gallagher probably remembers a pretty extensive space that we were looking at initially. We've narrowed it down quite significantly because we really want to just kind of get to those basic needs, but we do want to meet those basic needs. So that's a really important piece of it. Do you want me to speak to the other programs?
Let me outline a couple of them, and then we'll tag team here for a second.
Okay.
So just stay here for a second. So some of the other areas that have not been finalized, but they're placeholders. So one of them is the concept of a learning kitchen is one that I would say is in that category. Another one that is in that category, there's an area here which is called grass underfoot. We've reserved a space for outdoor space, so it's in the program. There's some dollars. We still have to resolve whether and to what extent that's part of the program, but that would be another element that I would say is part that is listed. It has not yet been finalized. Do you have any other examples like that? That's what comes to my mind.
No, yeah, nothing that's completely unique and new other than the items that Mr. Applebaum has spoken to. I do want to say, though, that the BCC, the Reentry Center, any of the programming that we're looking at expanding in the new facility is really, the goals are to reduce recidivism. We have seen, in other communities where these programs are implemented that folks that go through these programs don't end up back in jail. And so the long-term effects of this and the reduction on community benefit and community cost is significant over the long term. So I think that's just a really important point that we want to make sure that, that we all understand.
So stick around because the second question, I am also going to ask you to help me with this. So the second question is, please identify all programs and services included in the design of the new jail that are not part of the existing jail. What are the projected operational costs of these programs and services? So let me once again start this answer, and then I'll let Laurel finish the answer. So first of all, to some degree, I would say that most of everything we're talking about in some way, shape, or form is in the existing jail. It simply is not in a form that maximizes what we need to do. It's not in the form that it needs to be in. The one that probably isn't in the existing jail is probably reentry, I guess. But the other ones, in some fashion, the service is dealt with. It's just not dealt with in a very effective way. And I'll let you further comment on that. In terms of projected operational costs, this is one of the next items. So you will recall that when we did the original plan, we did talk about operational savings, and those were all derived basically from not having correctional officers walk everybody through the jail, bringing everybody to these housing units. Now, this review does have to be done again, and it is planned to be done again, I know, by the sheriff's office, because now we have to look at it a second time on operational savings. We also have to talk about these various programs, because there are operational costs involved, there's benefits and costs. So that is part of the next aspect of this. And that's something that we're going to have to return to you to talk about in more detail.
Yeah, so just to add to that, a lot of the programming that is happening in the current facility cannot happen to the scale that we would like it to. For example, GED programming. So right now, they have to schedule a room. They have to bring the residents down to the room. There's a limited number that can participate at any one time. And so by putting programming, programming spaces on every housing unit, that allows us to bring the programming directly to the residents. In addition, the facility will be wired in such a way that if we're offering a GED class in one housing unit, we could potentially digitally project it into, the other housing units. So multiple housing units can receive the same programming, can be gathered in their own spaces. The corrections officers will not have to transport them. So there will be efficiency in that and in the delivery and the ability to offer programming to expanded people. I made the point earlier about reducing recidivism, but I also want to point out that many of the community partners that work with us in the jail have outside funding that they receive in the forms of grants or just the day-to-day work that they do, and then they would like to come in and offer those services in our facility as well. So, both partnering with the community to deliver these programs and these services, and then thinking about how we reduce recidivism are two pretty key pieces around, cost savings. We are working right now that we have the housing units established and thinking about what programming we specifically want to have in there. We'll be working through, operational costs associated with that, but don't have, solid numbers right now.
So, those are our response to those questions.
I know those were kind of tough to answer because I know where you're at. So, and I'm not asking this for you right now, but I know Ms. Simon is concerned about transportation, and I'm sure that's going to be incorporated into it, and you're not ready yet. I'm certain of that. But things like that, I think, are top of mind for council. But let's find out where everybody's at right now. Questions, Mr. Kelly?
Mr. Chairman, a couple of questions. The number 8 on your little site layout here, the sheriff's admin,
Yes.
that's where all of the sheriff's employees would go? I mean, would that include locker rooms and exercise and all that kind of stuff for them, or?
The answer is yes, and if you have specific questions, we have our staff here that have been working on this and can answer specific questions about what's in there. But generally speaking, the answer is yes. That is where the bulk of the sheriff's, department resides. Not all of it, but the bulk of it. And that's also where the various, there's all sorts of different components that are in the program.
Okay, but this is where the sheriff's department's going to be located, right?
Is this how you do? Well, I'll let you answer that question. This is more of a.
Nicole English with Public Works. Yes, so it's the main operation of the Sheriff's Department. Obviously, they go out on runs and they're outside, but it also includes their main locker room. It includes their wellness center, workout facility, staff dining, and then the professional development center that's going to be where that old Aldi's
In
building
the
is.
back there.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and the only reason I didn't want to answer, I don't know what else might be outside of the building. I know what's in the building.
Yeah, the only thing is, there's protective services officers that are stationed at different buildings. They're obviously not going to be in this location, but essentially everybody who's housed now in the Justice Center comes.
Sure, but when they come to work, that's
They
where
come
they're
here.
going, right?
Correct.
Correct, okay.
And that's what the big parking field in the back where 12 is to accommodate all of the employee parking. So they would come there with their personal cars.
Okay. Then one other question, if I may. So food pantry was mentioned.
That simply refers to what Laurel was talking about in that area that we just talked about, the release program. It's simply the provision of some food for those who are leaving the jail.
It's not
It's not a
going,
general pantry for the general public to come to. That was a concept that was talked about at one point in time. That is not part of this program.
okay, that was my concern, that the public would be coming in there to use a food pantry. May not work well with the people coming out if there's any type of previous encounter. Okay.
That is not part of the program.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think there's a lot of conceptual ideas that are now out in the world in which we live that
There
are
were-
no longer there, that are creating some angst among some of our friends over in the justice system.
There
And,
were some ideas and concepts that were, probably reasonable to explore, but at the end of the day, they're not part of this program.
ultimately, it is a jail. Okay. Any further questions? Yes, ma'am.
Through the chair to Mr. Applebaum, any updates on the Garfield jail being merged?
I would just have a lot,
Any updates on the current Garfield jail being merged into this new behavioral center?
at this point in time, it is not part of this program. It is not part of what I'm presenting, and it's also not part of our mission. So unless there's something I don't know about, the answer is no. It's simply not part of this project.
Okay, where is the, on your diagram, where is the cafeteria and kitchen? And will it be on each level, or?
Do you want to talk, Ellis, a little bit about just the detail?
Are we, you know what, Jeff, on this, wouldn't that be better once you have your schematic designs to
Yeah, I
better
mean, we know
show us?
generally where it is, but we should wait on that, and then we can show it to you as it emerges. Because it
Well, you
could
can, you
change
can
a little
actually
bit.
see it.
Yeah,
So-
where is it generally? Which building? It's gonna be in number 4?
So the,
What do you want to do?
the jail kitchen is in the jail area by the housing units, but then there is a cafeteria, staff cafeteria that would be located more towards the front. I would say the exact location's still working out, but as far as on every floor, we envision kind of like in the sheriff's admin, almost like here, where you have a break room on every floor, but you don't have a full cafeteria. There'll be one that's located on site for staff, and then there'll be the jail kitchen.
Because I thought we were trying to eliminate cost in terms of sheriff deputies having to transport them to different areas of the building.
The food will come to the housing units.
Yeah, the food comes.
Yes. So one kitchen that prepares it, and then the food will come to the
There's
housing
no
unit.
cafeteria, yeah, so there's no
Yes.
cafeteria for the inmates.
Correct.
I thought you were talking about a cafeteria for staff.
Both.
Okay, but once again, Councilman Gallagher makes a good point. We're going to come back to you at the end of schematic design, and we'll show you the detail within the building. Right now, there's placeholders for all of these things.
Right.
And it's all within the square footage, but that could change a little bit. But we'll come back with a much more robust presentation when we get to that stage.
I think in April, we'll have a better idea where it's at and how they're going to get the food there hot, and I think that'll make a lot more sense.
One last question
Yes,
in
ma'am.
terms of GMP. So just to confirm what you said about GMP, so that chart that you presented us, it will not be in place until council in 2/26 when we vote on it. I'm just worried about it changing. you know?
No, I understand that. So let me be clear what's going to happen. We will get the comprehensive GMP proposal from the design build team in December, so we'll know what they are proposing. We will then take, so we'll know that number. We will take a month or so to reconcile it. We go through it. You know you've seen this before with our hotel. We'll go through it in great detail, negotiate pieces and parts of it, get it all organized, and then present that to council as in a final form right now, we're saying in February is when that's going to occur. But we'll know the number, and keep in mind, the number, it will not be a big surprise, because what's going to be happening, now that we know that everyone has to operate within this budget, as we get through schematic design, we get an estimate. If it's over the budget, we work it back. As we get through design development, we do the same thing. So we're monitoring this number. We're working with these teams nonstop. So the expectation is that we don't have any dramatic surprises at the end, and we have contingencies built in for that. So it's not like, we're not going to have an oh my God moment at the end of this thing. The whole process is developed so that it's managed and so that we avoid that kind of thing. The key, frankly, is right now getting this budget set, because now we know the parameters within which we're working.
Good. Mr. Schlepper.
Yeah, through the chair. I happened to actually be over in this part of town over the weekend, and I tend to be that person that's a little bit nosy that'll pull in and walk around and check it out. And while this isn't directly in my district, it is immediately adjacent to my district in Valley View there. So when you're driving up Granger Road out of the valley, there is a significant amount of incline as you go up that hill. And looking at this site layout, it looks like about 25% of that land falls into that space of significant elevation changes. Were there constraints with the site, limitations because of that? And do we know what the plans are for that 25-30% swath of the site that actually looks like it's unusable? This is just to educate
I
myself.
assume you're talking about where the site drops off. Yeah. So the answer is yes. Obviously, it created some restrictions on the buildability of the site. It's one of the reasons that we actually expanded, as you'll recall, the size of the site to make sure that we had all the available space we needed. That area is completely usable for retention basins, which is, part of the plan. It is theoretically usable in the future, but it's not part of any use plan right now. It is good for retention basins, it's good for runoff, but it's not ideal. And as you can see from the layout, there's no construction anticipated for that aspect of the site.
Thank you. Through the chair, as we're building, have we given any consideration to the greening of this jail? Solar panels?
Yes. And so right now, there are two things that are going on with that. There is the concept of the use of solar panels in the parking area, and also there's still an ongoing discussion with the county and investigation of the possibility of using geothermal. So both of those are underway right now, and they're both components of the project that we'll come back and talk to you about. But in particular, the geothermal investigation is still ongoing. Obviously, if we can do anything along those lines for energy conservation, sustainability, it's something that the county's interested in exploring and we're exploring.
Great, glad to hear that. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, Jeff, thank you. I know when we come back in April, you'll have quite the presentation for us. And I'm sure at that time, the questions will increase. And I look forward to that. And I'll give you plenty of notice, but when we're ready in April, if the committee and all the council could have what you have for us on the Friday before the committee meeting on a Tuesday, so we can take the weekend to look at it and coordinate our questions.
Okay. As I mentioned, right now the current plan is having the schematic design completed around April 9th. So we'll want to get that, have a little bit of time to work with it, but that will be the basis probably for what we then present.
Great. Anything further for Jeff here? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any miscellaneous business? None? Thank you.